We start today focusing on the security situation we've got on our hands in this country. We're joined now by Pastor Ladi Thompson, who is also a security consultant. Thank you for coming on this morning.
The pleasure is mine, sir.
You've done lots of study, research about this security challenge we've got on our hands for a long time, I might add. From your perspective, what is going on? Because there are people who don't quite understand what exactly the situation is, what they want, why this is going on. Tell us about it.
Thank you very much. I think precisely for about 14 years ago, we began to announce to the nation that we would be facing severe problems, and it would be coming from religious extremism. And as you rightly pointed out, 14 years after the fact, it's mounted slowly. It took about 8 years to persuade people that it was real. Now, the unfortunate thing right now is that the greatest enemy of Nigeria's destiny right now is not the Boko Haram. It is many people who are emerging from various quarters with different diagnoses. And this is the challenge. When a patient has cancer, and people say, and you have quacks who are talking about malaria, talking about, different diseases, the patient is bound to die. And what I like to say is this, and I would like to say that if anybody offers anything else, apart from what I'm about to say now, is either that they are genuinely mistaken, or you have people who distort the truth to give Boko Haram the advantage. A doctor cannot treat a patient until you diagnose properly what the sickness is. So what exactly is Boko Haram? It's just a symptom. What is happening to Nigeria is simple. It is not religious. It is not political. It is not traditional or customs or whatever it is that people are saying it is. What it is simple. It's a hydra. A hydra is a many-headed device. And this hydra is a socio-political, socio-economic, socio-judicial, socio-educational, socio-militaristic, I could go on, hydra that hides under religion. Now, its strength is its religious cloak. In the Nigerian case right now, it's Islam, that's the religion that it has chosen to hide under. In the year 1095, Pope Urban II made a speech. It was hijacked by this same thing. And for 200 years, it was bloodshed and gore on a devastating scale. So the truth is this, is that until this nation sits down to understand that there is no relationship between what we're facing right now and the Niger Delta issue. There's no relationship between what Nigeria is facing, that's called Boko Haram, and issues of kidnappings and other instances across the country. Until we understand this, we will forever be at a disadvantage. And like every sickness, if this thing is allowed to progress a bit more, 18 months max, we will be on the road of no return.
18 months is what you predict?
Maximum.
Maximum.
If we don't handle it properly.
Well, for us to handle it properly, I think we also need to know the cause. Because as you rightly said, there have been many, many diagnoses. Some of them religious, some of them political, some of them economic, in terms of trying to explain it. Perhaps they are all, interrelated. But what can you tell us from what we know of Boko Haram? What can you tell us that its mission is? Because I think essentially that's the question people are asking now. What exactly are they trying to achieve?
It's simple. What Boko Haram is doing is no different from any generic across the entire world. First of all, let me put it like this. The Nigerian situation is peculiar because, first of all, we have a documented global resurgence of what we call Islamism. Now, not Islam, Islamism, the cloak of Islam over this process. Now, in the Nigerian case, What happened really was that the global resurgence merged with an ancient local strain. Up until the merger, the ancient local strain was like a vestige. It existed, it was creeping, it was making very slow progress. But when it merged with the international counterpart, they brought in a lot of sophistication, and terrorism was remodeled, so to speak. There was an absorption of the new model of terrorism that is global. And you see, the mixture of those two things produced a deadlier version than anything on the globe anywhere else. Because we have degrees of brutality in Nigeria that hasn't shown up anywhere else in the world.
For instance?
Well, when I say degrees of brutality, remember that 9/11 was a turning point, as it were. It was like a wake-up call for Western nations that this problem had been with them all along, but they had ignored it. Now, in the Nigerian case, we have lost more people in 2005, for instance. I was in Maiduguri in 2005, and I remember the Danish cartoon Brouhaha. Now, if you recall very well, more Nigerians died in the protests for the Danish cartoons than any other nationality in the world. And you need to ask yourself, how come the brutality here in terms of the cruelty of the application, we're talking about ripping open bellies, we're talking about gory stuff, that ordinarily in other places there's a more clinical way, as it were, that their war is being propagated. Now look at the abductions that go on here. Nowhere else in the world do we have the kind of numbers that we have here. In 2008, I sent a team to a little village outside Kaduna then, I think Pangwegwa, with armed escorts. Two girls then had been kidnapped then, and there was negotiations to try and get them back for their parents. So what you're looking at here is the African version of something that's global, that actually is deadlier because value to human worth here has not really been developed. And we will continue to face these challenges until we realize that this thing, by definition, I'll tell you something that might just help us as a nation. By definition, what we're looking at is modeled after something that was repackaged between, I think, 1992 and 96 in Sudan.
You were telling us about, I was asking you about instances of brutality. You said it was more brutal, but
Yes.
you're actually trying to tell us
Yes.
about what exactly it is they want.
Oh, okay, no,
Who they
there's
are and
no,
what they
I mean,
want.
they've never hidden, it's very amusing because I keep pointing out that even the appellation Boko Haram is a digression. It's something that has not really helped us. It's a coinage that was elevated by the Western press to suit the taste of their own people. But on the other hand, they also helped us to bring attention to something that Nigeria had kept ignoring. Now, you're asking me precisely what is I want to get your question right to nail it.
What exactly it is they want?
Yes.
What are they trying to
What
achieve?
do they want?
Yeah.
Good. Now, for emphasis, I like that. Let everybody stand clear and know this clearly. You are dealing with an ideological problem. You're dealing with a set of people who want control at all costs. They are implacable. They do not negotiate in sincerity. They do not have any compassion whatsoever. And they use the cloak of religion to draw the loyalty of many, using the instrument of terror. Having studied the human being and known what the reactions of persons are to terror, they use terror effectively to subjugate, to subdue, to overrun completely, until they establish for their own convenience a religious creed, like it was in Afghanistan. Like I said, in this case, it's the Sharia that they are touting as the rule. But remember that when you put the Sharia as total rule, you also will have caliphates emerging. And so there's going to be a restructure of the existing order completely in a way like you don't want to imagine as a female. That's what they want. And nothing, in all case studies across the entire world, nothing ever deters them. They cannot be accommodated. They cannot be negotiated with. They cannot, unlike other issues where they have some point that they're fighting for, this irrational move is all that they have, and it involves a brainwashing process. And once the process starts, there's no amount of negotiation or placating, nothing offered. Let me give you a case in point. Remember that when Osama bin Laden, for instance, was declared wanted by the United States government, they put a bounty on his head that was almost $1 billion or something plus. It took 10 years for the strongest nation, quote, in the world to locate a man who had a bounty of $1 billion, more than $1 billion, on his head. So you're dealing with people who have a disdain. In fact, you're raising something here that I think is very important, which is that the political class in Nigeria needs to understand something. Unlike all quarters that they believe are susceptible to the lure of money, they are dealing with something that has more disdain for money than they have ever imagined in their lives. And not only that, the funding behind them is way beyond what anything or anybody in Nigeria can think to offer them to settle.
Does that mean that the funding, because we hear people say they are funded internationally, is that the case?
It's a mix. You see, in the Nigerian case, we have been extremely careless. When I say careless, the propagation of this new hybrid in Nigeria works like this. It has the foot soldiers who are causing all the mayhem. But believe you me, they are not really the most dangerous. It has its intelligence. It has its finances. It has its media who are amongst you. And in the years ahead, many of you are going to be shocked when people are going to begin to make declarations that all along they'd been on the payroll and their sympathies had always been with what the Boko Haram represents.